A quiet comfort usually settled over Portland this time of year. A crisp, clean chill that hinted at the approaching holiday season, but that Tuesday afternoon, as the December light began to fade, a different kind of cold seeped into my bones. It was the chill of betrayal, the kind that freezes your soul, hardening everything it touches. I found it on his tablet, a message from Campbell, and a voice memo whispering, "Room 302, and escape fund." In that instant, my 17-year marriage shattered. Before that moment, my life with Archer had felt, at least on the surface, remarkably stable. I was Dallas Hayden, the quiet force behind Daily Grind, Archer's successful coffee shop empire, while Archer was the charming face, the visionary who captivated customers with his artisanal blends and easy smile. I was the one who made sure the bills were paid, the inventory was stocked, and the payroll was met. I managed our home, balanced the books, and navigated the intricate web of our joint finances, allowing him to focus solely on his passion. I was the silent partner, the dependable anchor, always there, always supportive, but somewhere along those 17 years, supportive had morphed into taken for granted. Archer's dismissiveness had become a daily constant, a subtle erosion of my worth. My suggestions for the business were met with patronizing chuckles or vague nods as he scrolled through his phone. My concerns about our shared investments were brushed aside with a wave of his hand and a confident, "Don't worry your pretty little head, Dallas. I've got it handled." I had become an efficient, almost invisible, cog in his self-proclaimed machinery, a convenient wife who kept everything running smoothly, while he basked in the spotlight. I told myself it was just his way, that his success was our success, and that the occasional sting of his indifference was a small price to pay for the comfortable life we'd built for ourselves and our daughter, Landry. The tablet lay forgotten on the kitchen island, a stray casualty of Archer's morning rush. I'd picked it up, intending to plug it in, perhaps quickly check the weather for Landry's afternoon soccer practice. A notification flashed on the screen, an unread message. Normally, I wouldn't pry. Privacy was a boundary we generally respected, even if the emotional distance between us had grown into a chasm. But something, a subtle shift in the air, a prickle of intuition I couldn't ignore, made me tap it open. The sender was Campbell. I knew the name. Campbell Fletcher. One of those effortlessly chic, impossibly young Portland creatives, always at the right galleries, her social media presence meticulously curated. I'd seen her occasionally at Daily Grind, her bright laugh sometimes carrying over the hum of the espresso machine. A fleeting customer I'd barely registered. Now, her name glared at me from the screen, a hot, branding iron. The message was short, intimate, and sickeningly sweet. "Can't wait for room 302 tonight, my love. Almost got everything ready for our escape." My fingers trembled, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. Asterisk. Room 302? Escape fund? Asterisk. It sounded like something out of a cheap novel. But then, there it was. A voice memo, attached to the same thread. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to break free. I tapped it. Archer's voice, hushed, laced with an unnerving tenderness I hadn't heard directed at me in years, filled the quiet kitchen. "Room 302, Riverfront Hotel. Tonight. And don't forget the escape fund, darling. We'll need it." The words echoed in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Twisting the knife. It wasn't just an affair. It was a premeditated betrayal. A carefully planned departure. An escape fund meant more than just a fleeting indiscretion. It implied a future, a financial entanglement, a calculated move to abandon me and Landry. The initial shock gave way to a wave of nausea, followed by a burning disbelief that quickly solidified into a gut-wrenching realization. Archer wasn't just sleeping with someone else. He was actively siphoning funds, planning to disappear, using the very money I'd helped him manage, the security I'd worked to build for our family. My entire reality, the comfortable life I'd believed we shared, crumbled around me. The cold, crisp air of December outside had nothing on the ice that was now flowing through my veins. My marriage wasn't just shattered. It had been meticulously, brutally, and financially dismantled, piece by agonizing piece, right under my nose. The ice, however, wasn't paralyzing. It was clarifying, replacing the burning disbelief with a chilling, surgical precision. My mind, usually a whirlwind of daily tasks and motherly concerns, clicked into an unfamiliar, formidable gear. There was no screaming, no confrontation, no immediate emotional outburst. That would come later, if at all. For now, there was only one thing to do, one vital nerve to sever before he could disappear with everything we'd built. I walked to my home office, my steps steady despite the tremor deep within my core. My fingers, surprisingly agile, flew across the keyboard. First, the joint credit cards. Freeze. Then, the checking and savings accounts. Transfer every available cent into an obscure, long-forgotten personal account Archer didn't even know existed. An emergency fund I'd started years ago, tucked away for a just-in-case that had now, catastrophically, arrived. Finally, I flagged every business account for review, adding layers of security Archer wouldn't be able to bypass without my explicit authorization, or a forensic accountant. It took less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes to dismantle his financial life, just as he had dismantled mine. The first call came barely an hour later. His name flashed on my screen, followed by 3 missed calls and a text. * Dallas, what the hell? My card just got declined at the roaster. Call me now. * I let it ring. And ring again. His frustration was palpable even through the silence of my refusal to answer. Then came the voicemail, his voice initially laced with irritation, quickly escalating to confusion, then outright panic. "Dallas, this isn't funny," he began, his tone tight. "My Amex just bounced. My business account is frozen. What have you done? Call me back. This is times important. *" A few minutes later, another call. Another voicemail. His voice more strained. "I can't access any funds. They're saying something about unusual activity and fraud flags. Is this some kind of sick joke? Our entire life savings, my business funds? They're gone. You have to fix this, Dallas." The panic was delicious, a bitter honey coating my raw nerves. I could almost hear the sputtering, the frantic clicking of keys as he tried to log into accounts he no longer controlled. He hadn't even reached Riverfront Hotel yet, I surmised. The financial chaos had erupted before his romantic rendezvous. I sat on the sofa, tablet now safely out of sight. A mug of herbal tea steaming gently in my hands, though I couldn't taste it. On the surface, I was a picture of serene composure, the diligent wife patiently waiting for her husband to return from his business trip. Inside, however, a storm raged, searing rage battled with a cold, calculated resolve. My instincts screamed to confront him, to unleash 17 years of suppressed frustration, and the agony of this fresh betrayal, to tell him exactly what I knew, how I knew it, and watch his smug face crumble. But a deeper, more powerful voice, the one I hadn't listened to enough over the years, whispered caution. *. Not yet. Not like this. *. Direct confrontation, a messy explosion, would only serve his narrative, allowing him to paint me as the hysterical wife, irrational and emotionally unhinged. He would twist it. Somehow? No. This was a game of chess, and he'd just made his king vulnerable. I had to play smarter, colder, with a precision he hadn't accounted for. He had underestimated me for years, seen me as merely a silent extension of his own ambition. Now, he would learn the true power of a silent partner, the one who quietly holds all the strings. Cutting off his access to funds wasn't just an act of revenge, it was a strategic chokehold. Without his escape fund, without access to the business's cash flow, his plans with Campbell and any potential disappearing act were dead in the water. He was grounded, vulnerable, and completely unprepared for the real battle that was about to begin. The satisfaction wasn't in his panic, Though that was undeniably sweet, it was in the sudden, sharp shift of power. A seismic recalibration that he wouldn't even begin to comprehend until it was far too late. The silence from my end must have gnawed at him, because after another hour of his increasingly desperate calls, his final voicemail was a guttural plea, riddled with fear. "Dallas, please just call me back. Everything's collapsing." "I don't understand. It's a mistake, isn't it? Just tell me what's happening." The hunger in his voice was raw. A sound I hadn't heard since the early days of daily grind, when we'd almost lost everything. But this time, it tasted of his own making. I waited a few more minutes, letting the digital echo of his panic settle, then picked up my phone, not to answer his call, but to dial his number directly. My thumb hovered over the contact for a moment, a fleeting breath before plunging into the cold waters of confrontation. He picked up on the first ring, a frantic "Dallas?" His voice raspy. "Archer," I said, my tone even, almost breezy. "Are you all right? I've been busy with Landry's schedule, just seeing your calls now." "What's all this fuss about?" The lie felt like a finely crafted weapon in my mouth, cold and sharp. I heard him take a shaky breath, a moment of relief before the anger resurfaced. "What's all this fuss about?" he spluttered, the underlying panic still evident. "My cards are declined, Dallas. Every single one. The business accounts, the joint accounts, they're all frozen." "What in God's name did you do? Frozen?" I feigned confusion, a slight frown touching my brow, though I knew my voice wouldn't betray it. "That's odd. Everything seemed fine on my end. Perhaps a bank error? You know how those things can be, especially with all the holiday traffic." "Are you still at your business meeting?" I let the word business hang in the air, a subtle barb. Yes, of course," he stammered, his quick denial a telltale sign of his deceit. "Just a few complications, but that's not the point, Dallas. Our money, my business. You have to fix this. Immediately." "Our money is fine, Archer," I countered, allowing a hint of steel to enter my voice, just enough to catch his attention. "At least, my portion of it is. But speaking of complications, you mentioned you were at the riverfront, correct? For your important business meeting." A pause stretched between us, taut and sudden. Yes, that's right. Just finished up, actually." The lie was transparent, clumsy. I knew he was still in the thick of it. Or perhaps just leaving room 302, expecting to find his escape fund waiting. "Oh, really?" I murmured, a faint smile touching my lips though he couldn't see it. "And how was room 302? I do hope your business partner was accommodating." The air crackled with his sudden, shocked silence. The shift in his demeanor was palpable, even through the phone lines. What are you talking about, Dallas?" he stuttered, his voice losing all pretense of composure, cracking with raw fear. "Room 302? I don't know what you mean. There's no room 302. I'm in the lobby, waiting for a cab." His desperate attempts to backtrack, to conjure up another lie, were pathetic. Each fumbled word only solidified the concrete of my resolve, hardening any lingering doubt. He was a cornered rat, scrambling for an escape that no longer existed. "Don't bother, Archer," I said, my voice now devoid of any pretense, cold as the December air. "It's over." I ended the call, cutting him off mid-stutter, leaving him to drown in the silence of his own unraveling. The phone felt heavy in my hand, but the tremor was gone. Only a deep, calm certainty remained. My next call was to my mother, a swift and efficient arrangement. "Mom, I was hoping Landry could spend a few days with you and Dad this week," I began, inventing a plausible scenario. "I've got a busy few days ahead with some unexpected business matters, and I really need to focus. She's been asking to see her grandparents anyway. Landry, bless her heart, loved visiting them. Her father's erratic temper and the unspoken tension in our home often left her unsettled, and the calm, unwavering affection of my parents was a balm to her young soul. My mother, ever understanding, readily agreed, arranging to pick Landry up from school the following morning. I packed a small bag for Landry later that evening, explaining to my daughter that Mama needed to work on some important things, but she'd have a wonderful time with Grandma and Grandpa. Landry's cheerful acceptance was a bittersweet relief. She would be safe, far from the explosion that was about to rock her father's world. With Landry secured, my focus sharpened to a single point: the Riverfront Hotel. I knew there was a major charity gala tonight, an annual event that always drew Portland's social elite. A perfect stage for Archer's carefully cultivated image. He wouldn't miss it, not if Campbell was by his side, ready to introduce her new beau to her mother and their circle. The pieces clicked into place. My initial discovery had been about their room, but the mention of a specific hotel, a known venue for social gatherings, opened up a more potent opportunity. My planning was meticulous, fueled by a searing clarity that cut through the pain. This wasn't just about publicly shaming Archer. It was about stripping away his carefully constructed facade, exposing the con man beneath the charming veneer. I wanted to hit him where it would hurt most: his reputation, his credibility, and his financial standing among the very people whose admiration he craved. The goal wasn't just revenge. It was an unequivocal declaration that he would no longer dictate my worth or our shared future. I spent the next few hours reviewing my wardrobe, selecting an outfit that exuded understated power, then ensuring my phone's camera was fully charged. Every detail, from my entrance to my exit, was visualized, rehearsed silently in my mind. Tonight, the spotlight would be on Archer and Campbell, but I would be the director. The Riverfront Hotel's grand ballroom buzzed with the low thrum of a string quartet and the clinking of champagne flutes. Tonight was the annual Children's Legacy Gala, an event Archer had always insisted we attend, a cornerstone of his carefully cultivated public image. I surveyed the scene from a discreet alcove, the soft lamplight catching the subtle shimmer of my midnight blue silk dress. It was a gown I'd bought years ago, elegant and understated, chosen now not for allure, but for armor. My hair was swept back, revealing the sharp line of my jaw, and my eyes, though betraying nothing, missed nothing. The stage was set. It didn't take long to spot them. They stood near the large bay window overlooking the Willamette, bathed in the city lights, a tableau of illicit romance. Archer, in his impeccably tailored charcoal suit, was laughing, his head thrown back in that familiar, charming way that always drew people in. Beside him, Campbell Fletcher, a vision in emerald green, leaned into him, her hand proprietarily on his arm. Her laugh, a high tinkling sound, cut through the ambient chatter. And then I saw her. Standing a little apart, yet clearly part of their intimate circle, was Eleanor Fletcher, Campbell's mother. Eleanor, a prominent fixture in Portland's social scene. A woman I'd known casually for years, her expression now one of indulgent amusement as she watched her daughter and my husband. The sight of her, a living endorsement of their affair, hardened the ice in my veins even further. This wasn't just a secret rendezvous. It was becoming a publicly sanctioned relationship, built on the wreckage of my marriage. My composure was absolute, a mask so perfectly fitted it felt like a second skin. I took a deep, steadying breath, then began my slow, deliberate approach. Each step was a quiet drumbeat, announcing my arrival to myself, if not yet to them. Heads turned as I passed, a polite nod here, a brief smile there. No one suspected the seismic shift that was about to occur. My gaze was fixed on Archer, and for the first time in years, he looked up and saw me, not as the background fixture, but as a presence. His smile faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before it smoothed into forced politeness. Campbell, following his gaze, stiffened slightly. Eleanor, however, remained oblivious, still smiling at some private joke. I stopped a few feet from them, close enough to be heard, far enough to maintain an aura of untouchable control. "Archer?" I said, my voice clear and even, devoid of the tremor I knew he expected. "Campbell and Eleanor, it's lovely to see you." My tone was the calm before the storm, and for a moment, they almost believed it. Archer recovered first, his practiced charm kicking in. "Dallas, what a surprise! I didn't realize you were attending tonight." He even managed a tight, nervous smile. Campbell offered a weak, "Mrs. Hayden." Eleanor, finally turning, looked genuinely pleased. "Dallas, dear, you look absolutely radiant. We were just discussing the wonderful work the gala does." She gestured between Archer and Campbell. Archer was just telling us about his latest blends. I met Archer's eyes, a silent challenge passing between us. "Oh, I'm sure he was. Archer always has a talent for blending things." My voice was still steady, but the slight emphasis on blending was a subtle, venomous warning. I saw Archer swallow hard, his gaze darting to Campbell, who now looked distinctly uncomfortable. "In fact," I continued, raising my voice just a fraction, ensuring it carried a little further, "I've learned a great deal about Archer's unique talents for blending lately, especially his talent for blending our finances with his extracurricular activities." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Watching Archer's face drain of color, Campbell looked utterly bewildered, her emerald dress suddenly seeming less vibrant. A few nearby conversations died down, drawn by the subtle shift in atmosphere. I felt my phone, clutched discreetly in my hand, activate its recording function. "Dallas, what are you talking about?" Archer managed, his voice now a desperate whisper. "This isn't the time or place, isn't it?" I countered, a cold smile finally touching my lips. "I think this is precisely the time and place. A public forum, surrounded by the very people whose admiration you so desperately crave. People who might be very interested to know about your little business meeting in room 302 at this very hotel last night." I let my gaze sweep from Archer to Campbell, lingering on her. "And the escape fund you were discussing, darling." The words struck them like physical blows. Archer gasped, a choked guttural sound. Campbell's eyes widened, her jaw dropping open as her face flushed a furious crimson, then paled. Eleanor, sensing the shift, looked from me to her daughter, her brow furrowed in confusion, then dawning horror. "Room 302? Campbell, what is she talking about?" Eleanor's voice was sharp, laced with an undeniable edge. Campbell tried to speak, but only a strangled squeak emerged. Archer, recovering slightly, started to stammer. "Dallas, stop this. You're being hysterical." "Hysterical?" I laughed. A short, sharp sound that cut through the polite murmurs now rippling through the growing crowd. "Is it hysterical to discover your husband, after 17 years of marriage, is not only having an affair with a woman half my age, but is also systematically siphoning money from our joint accounts and our business to fund his escape with her?" I pointed my finger directly at Campbell. "The same escape fund you were so eagerly discussing with my husband Campbell, as he planned to leave his family destitute." The ballroom, once a symphony of genteel chatter, was now plunged into stunned silence. All eyes were on us, a tableau frozen in disbelief. Gasps erupted, then a low hum of whispers, like a hive suddenly disturbed. I saw Sarah, my friend, across the room, her hand flying to her mouth. Business associates, prominent benefactors, and even some of Archer's own employees stared, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Archer lunged forward, his hand outstretched, as if to cover my mouth. "Dallas, you're insane! You're making this up!" I stepped back, my eyes blazing. But my voice remained steady, a cold, hard diamond. "Am I? Funny, because the recording on his tablet of him promising you room 302 and an escape fund for your little tryst seems quite real to me, and I have it all right here." I held up my phone, not playing the recording, but simply letting them see it in my hand. A silent threat. Campbell burst into tears, her facade shattering. Eleanor, her face a mask of mortification, looked ready to faint. Archer, trapped, exposed, and utterly humiliated, stood frozen. His once charming face now a mask of pure, unadulterated terror and defeat. He was no longer the successful cafe owner, the beloved husband, the respected community member. He was simply a cheat, a fraudster, a man caught in his own web of lies, unraveling before the very eyes of the world he so desperately tried to impress. The applause he usually sought at these events was now replaced by the deafening silence of public condemnation. And the spotlight indeed was entirely on him. The deafening silence surrounding Archer quickly began to dissipate, replaced by a low hum that, to my surprise, seemed to pivot and swell around me. The collective gasp had faded, but the judgment in the air was thick, palpable, like a fog rolling in from the Willamette. Eyes that moments ago had widened in shock at Archer's downfall now narrowed in accusation towards me. I felt the shift instantly, a palpable chill that had nothing to do with the December air. The whispers started, carrying on the polite clinking of glasses that had resumed, albeit with a new, strained rhythm. How could she do that? So public, so cruel. Poor Archer, to be humiliated like this. It was as if by revealing his truth *I times had committed the greater sin. The wife who had endured years of neglect and just discovered egregious financial betrayal was now the villain. The hysterical woman who dared to disrupt the gilded facade of Portland society. Archer's parents, who had arrived later, and stood in a small, tight knot near the dessert table, watched me with expressions of profound disgust, their faces twisted with an anger that mirrored Archer's own humiliation. They didn't approach, but their condemning stares were like physical blows, silently accusing me of destroying their son. A profound isolation settled over me, heavier than any silk dress. I felt an acute sense of injustice, a burning sting that overshadowed the fleeting triumph of moments before. I had exposed a lie, unveiled a fraud. Yet here I was, painted as the malicious spouse. Friends I had shared countless dinners and charity events with now averted their gaze, their smiles tightening, their bodies subtly turning away. It was a silent ostracism, a collective recoil from the scandalous woman. Even Sarah, my closest friend, whose hand had flown to her mouth in shock just minutes earlier, now stood at a distance, her eyes wide and uncertain, a subtle discomfort radiating from her. She didn't come to my side, didn't offer a word of comfort. The unspoken message was clear. My public act had crossed an invisible line, and I was now on the wrong side of it. The desire to scream, to lash out at their hypocrisy, was almost overwhelming. To demand, did you not hear what he did? What he planned? But I held it back. Unleashing further emotion would only confirm their preconceived notions, solidifying the image of the unhinged wife. Instead, I straightened my spine, drawing on a reserve of strength I hadn't known I possessed. My resolve, instead of crumbling under the widespread criticism, hardened like cold steel. Each pointed look, each whispered accusation, each averted glance, instead of weakening me, forged a deeper certainty within my core. I knew, with absolute clarity, that what I had done was necessary, not just for me, but for Landry, for the future we deserved, free from Archer's deceit. There was an internal battle, a fleeting shadow of self-doubt that whispered, was it too much? Should I have handled it differently? But the memory of Campbell's sickeningly sweet message, the voice memo of Archer's tender lies, the mention of an escape fund, it all snapped back into focus. He had planned to leave me destitute, to vanish with another woman, taking everything. My choice had been a preemptive strike, a desperate measure to reclaim control, to save myself and my daughter from financial ruin and further emotional devastation. No, I affirmed silently, my hand still gripping my phone, a small, defiant anchor. This was not about revenge, not solely. This was about justice. This was about self-preservation. And if society chose to see me as the villain for unmasking a cheat, then so be it. Their condemnation was a small price to pay for the profound liberation I had just begun to taste. They might judge, they might whisper, but their opinions would not define my truth. Archer had played his hand, and now it was time to play mine. utterly unburdened by his expectations or the fickle judgments of the very world he had tried to impress. The ringing condemnation of the riverfront hotel faded into a distant echo as I stepped back into the quiet sanctuary of my home. The public spectacle had served its purpose, a necessary surgical strike, but it was merely the first volley. The real war, the one Archer had meticulously plotted in the shadows, was only just beginning, and its true battleground lay hidden in a labyrinth of ledgers and illicit transactions. The escape fund wasn't just a casual mention. It was the thread that would unravel his entire scheme, a promise of financial ruin that now fueled my methodical search. My heart, still raw from the betrayal, was now encased in a practical, almost cold shell, prepared for the arduous task ahead. I transformed my home office, once a tidy space for household budgeting, into a command center. Stacks of documents accumulated on every surface. Years of daily grinds, bank statements, tax returns, payroll records, supplier invoices, and every joint account statement Archer had ever dismissed with a wave of his hand. It was a daunting mountain of paper and digital files, stretching back over a decade. But I approached it with the relentless focus of a detective. Late nights bled into early mornings, fueled by cold coffee and the burning clarity of injustice. The mundane tedium of cross-referencing dates and amounts was a strange balm, a concrete task that pushed away the swirling emotions of humiliation and anger. Each spreadsheet I opened, each line item I scrutinized, felt like chipping away at the stone facade Archer had built around his deception. The initial days were a blur of numbers and dates. I tracked every significant outgoing transaction, noted recurring payments, and flagged anything unusual. Archer had been clever, scattering smaller, seemingly innocuous payments across various accounts, hoping they'd blend into the background noise of a successful business. But I knew the rhythm of Daily Grind's finances better than he did, having been the silent architect of its operational stability for so long. Any deviation, however minor, now screamed at me. A series of modest but consistent transfers caught my eye. Payments made not to a known supplier or employee, but to an entity simply listed as NW Holdings LLC. The name meant nothing to me. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching corporate registries. NW Holdings LLC, registered in Oregon, address listed as a generic P.O. box in a nondescript part of town. The registered agent? Not Archer, but a proxy, a name I didn't recognize, yet one that seemed vaguely familiar in the periphery of Portland's business chatter. A low-profile lawyer known for setting up complex corporate structures. A chill went down my spine. This wasn't a bank error. This wasn't an oversight. This was a shell company, meticulously crafted to obscure the true recipient of its funds. The implications hit me with the force of a physical blow. The affair, the public humiliation, that had been deeply personal, a wound to my dignity. But this was a calculated, systemic fraud, an elaborate scheme to pilfer from the very business I had helped build, to strip away the financial security I had painstakingly managed for our family. Archer hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had systematically defrauded our shared future. The escape fund wasn't just a stash of cash. It was a carefully constructed financial apparatus designed to reroute wealth, to build a secret nest egg entirely separate from our marital assets. He hadn't just been planning to leave me. He had been actively impoverishing me, ensuring that when he finally did cut ties, I would be left with little. The loneliness of this discovery was profound. There was no one to confide in, no one to share the outrage with. Sarah was still distant, and Landry was safely with her grandparents, far from the grim reality I was uncovering. It was just me, the glow of the monitor, and the insidious threads of Archer's deceit. Each document I cross-referenced, each suspicious transaction I highlighted, confirmed a deepening spiral of his betrayal. His dismissive attitude, his condescending remarks about my inability to grasp real business decisions. It all clicked into place, not as arrogance, but as a deliberate smokescreen. He had needed me to be ignorant, to be the pretty little head he could wave away, so he could operate freely in the shadows. The rage that had simmered at riverfront now transformed into a cold, determined fire. I wasn't just fighting for a divorce settlement. I was fighting to expose a criminal, to reclaim what was rightfully ours, and to ensure he faced every single consequence of his elaborate, callous deception. The web was complex, but I was resolved to untangle every last strand. The digital breadcrumbs left by NW Holdings LLC led me deeper into the labyrinth of Archer's deceit, beyond simple transfers and into public records. My fingers, numb from endless scrolling, navigated through county assessor databases and property deeds. I cross-referenced the vague P.O. box address with various registered business fronts, following faint trails that Archer, in his arrogance, must have believed were utterly undetectable. It was in one such dusty corner of the internet, an archived land transaction, that I found it. A property listed not under Archer's name, nor even explicitly under NW Holdings LLC, but under a holding company whose primary shareholder was, unmistakably, NW Holdings LLC. The address led to Lake Oswego, a coveted affluent community renowned for its stunning waterfront properties and exclusive lifestyle. My heart dropped, a cold, sickening sensation. This wasn't some minor real estate venture. This was a substantial investment. A quick search of the address revealed a series of breathtaking photographs. A sprawling modern lodge, all glass and cedar, perched majestically on the lake's edge, with a private dock and sweeping views. It was the kind of luxury one only dreamed of, a trophy property that screamed wealth and privilege. And it was purchased with funds siphoned from daily grind, from our Times joint accounts, laundered through the shell company I'd just unearthed. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, drowning any lingering doubt about the true scale of Archer's deception. This wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment or a desperate move to cover a mistake. This was a long-term, meticulously orchestrated scheme. He hadn't just been planning an escape. He had been building a secret life, a luxurious hideaway, with funds meant for our family, for Landry's future, for the business I'd helped him nurture from the ground up. The escape fund wasn't just a cash hoard for a quick getaway. It was a foundational brick in a new, clandestine empire, far beyond simple embezzlement. This wasn't just an affair and a stolen weekend. This was a deliberate, systemic dismantling of our shared financial stability. A calculated act of economic violence. The emotional blow was far heavier than the initial shock of the affair. That had been a betrayal of the heart, a rupture of trust. This was a violation of everything I believed in. A cold, hard repudiation of our 17 years of partnership, both in life and business. He hadn't just been sleeping with Campbell. He had been systematically robbing me blind, planning to leave me with nothing but the wreckage of his public scandal. His dismissiveness, his patronizing remarks, his smug confidence, they weren't just character flaws. They were the carefully constructed facade of a con artist, masking a predatory intent. He had seen me not as a partner, but as a resource to be exploited, a convenient administrator for his fraudulent enterprise. The picture of the Lake Oswego Lodge, pristine and opulent, burned itself into my mind. It was a monument to his deceit, a tangible representation of how deeply and deliberately he had planned to betray every aspect of our life. The loneliness of my investigation intensified, but so too did my resolve. This was no longer just about recovering what was mine. It was about exposing the true criminal beneath the charming veneer, ensuring he faced the full consequences of his sophisticated, cold-blooded fraud. I had found the heart of his secret world, and now I would ensure it crumbled. The image of the Lake Oswego Lodge, a stark monument to Archer's deceit, burned a single, undeniable truth into my mind. This fight was beyond me alone. I had uncovered the rot, but I lacked the tools to surgically remove it. This intricate web of financial fraud, coupled with a bitter divorce, required an ally, a professional blade to cut through the intricate knots of his deception and Portland's often chummy legal landscape. My quiet resolve solidified into a pragmatic certainty. I needed the best. My search led me to Evelyn Reed, Her name had come up repeatedly, whispered in reverent or fearful tones, depending on who was speaking. Tenacious, sharp as a tack, doesn't suffer fools lightly. These were the adjectives most frequently attached to her. Her firm occupied a corner office suite overlooking the Willamette. Sleek and minimalist. A fitting reflection of her reputation. I walked in feeling a curious mix of apprehension and anticipation, clutching a meticulously organized briefcase filled with Archer's financial sins. Evelyn was everything her reputation promised. She was a woman in her late 40s, with striking silver streaks through her dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her posture was erect, her gaze direct, almost unnerving in its intensity. She didn't offer superficial pleasantries. Her demeanor was all business, which suited me perfectly. After a brief handshake, she gestured to the chair opposite her imposing desk. "Mrs. Hayden," she began, her voice low and crisp. "I've heard the whispers, naturally. What can you tell me that the gossip hasn't?" I took a deep breath, thankful for her directness. "The whispers only tell half the story, Miss Reed. The public humiliation was a prelude. The real story lies in what he tried to take." I opened my briefcase, laying out the neatly tabbed binders. "My husband, Archer Hayden, isn't just an adulterer. He's a systematic fraudster. He's been siphoning money from our joint accounts and our business, daily grind, for years, funneling it through a shell company called NW Holdings LLC, to fund a lavish secret life with his mistress and, I believe, to prepare for his escape." Evelyn listened, her expression unreadable, as I laid out my evidence. Bank statements with highlighted anomalies, the corporate registry documents for NW Holdings LLC, the property deed for the Lake Oswego Lodge traced back through the shell company. I detailed how he'd created the escape fund, how he'd dismissed my financial concerns, how he'd used my role as the silent partner to his advantage. My voice remained steady, clinical, as if reporting facts on a balance sheet. The raw emotion was still there, a pulsing ache beneath the surface, but I'd learned to channel it, to transform it into precision. When I finished, Evelyn sat in silence for a long moment, tapping a pen rhythmically against a leather-bound folder. Her gaze was fixed on the documents, then on me. "Mrs. Hayden," she said, her voice betraying the slightest hint of surprise. "This is thorough, exceptionally thorough. Most clients come to me with an emotional grievance and vague suspicions. You've come with a forensic audit." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "You've built a very strong case. The public spectacle, while unconventional, has created a narrative that will be hard for Archer to deny. But the financial fraud, particularly the shell company and the Lake Oswego property, that's where his carefully constructed world truly implodes." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a focused intensity that mirrored my own. "Our strategy will be two-pronged. First, we file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but immediately seeking an injunction against Archer's access to any remaining business or personal assets, given the evidence of fraud. Second, we will initiate a comprehensive forensic accounting investigation, leveraging all of your findings, to legally trace every penny he diverted. This isn't just about divorce. It's about exposing systematic financial misconduct that could carry criminal implications. We'll pursue full restitution, not just of marital assets, but compensation for the fraud itself." A wave of relief, cold and clear as mountain spring water, washed over me. For the first time since discovering Campbell's message, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that justice was truly within reach. Evelyn Reed understood. She saw beyond the messy emotional landscape of a betrayed wife and recognized the strategic, calculated fight for what was rightfully mine. "Good," I said, the single word laden with all the unspoken resolve and weary determination I possessed. Evelyn nodded. "Very well. My team will begin drafting the divorce petition immediately, incorporating the details of the financial malfeasance. We'll move quickly to file it, ensuring Archer has no further opportunity to conceal or divert assets. From this point forward, Mrs. Hayden, You are no longer the silent partner, you are the plaintiff. And we are going to make sure Archer Hayden faces the consequences of every single one of his lies. The formal papers were filed within days, a stark, legal declaration of war. The elegant calligraphy of my name, Dallas Hayden, stood out against the official government seals, a testament to my regained agency. It was no longer just me against Archer, isolated and fighting in the dark. Now, with Evelyn Reed at my side, armed with irrefutable proof, the full weight of the legal system was about to descend upon Archer's carefully built house of cards. The game had truly begun. Evelyn's promise to dismantle Archer's house of cards wasn't merely rhetoric. It was a blueprint for relentless action. Her team, a squadron of financial detectives, delved deeper than even I had been able to, meticulously following every shadow and whisper Archer had tried to bury. It was this forensic zeal that unearthed the name, Kevin O'Connell. The name sparked a faint echo in my memory, a ghost from Archer's past business ventures, long before Daily Grind, a partnership he'd always dismissed as a minor setback, or a personality clash. Evelyn, however, knew there was rarely smoke without fire in Archer's world. Getting O'Connell to speak, Evelyn explained, was like extracting blood from a stone. He'd clearly been burned before, scarred by his dealings with Archer, and wary of reigniting old wounds or facing new legal entanglements. His initial responses to Evelyn's discreet inquiries were evasive, bordering on hostile. He feared Archer's retaliatory power, the ability to spin narratives, to make unpleasant truths disappear. I imagined him as a man still looking over his shoulder, trapped by the ghost of a failed partnership he couldn't quite shake. But Evelyn, true to her reputation, was undeterred. She understood the psychology of such cases, the quiet pressure points of guilt and opportunity. She didn't threaten. She appealed to a deeper sense of justice, a chance for O'Connell to finally right a past wrong that had likely festered for years. She highlighted the sheer scale of Archer's current fraud, suggesting that if O'Connell came forward now, his testimony could be the linchpin, allowing us to expose Archer as a serial perpetrator, not just a one-off offender. It was an opportunity not just for us, but for O'Connell to find a measure of peace, to break free from the unspoken hold Archer still had over him. She offered protection, anonymity where possible, and, crucially, painted a picture of a world where Archer's deceit would finally be brought to light. Weeks later, I sat in Evelyn's office, feeling a nervous tremor. Kevin O'Connell was on a secure video call, his face gaunt, his eyes holding a haunted look. His voice, initially hesitant, grew steadier as he spoke, reliving the painful details of his former partnership with Archer. He meticulously described how Archer had systematically diverted funds from their joint venture, a short-lived tech startup, fabricating invoices, establishing dummy corporations, and ultimately bankrupting the company, while siphoning off its assets for himself. The parallels to my own situation were chillingly precise, a dark mirror reflecting Archer's modus operandi. O'Connell's sworn testimony wasn't just damning, it was definitive. It laid bare a pattern of identical financial fraud and manipulation that stretched back years. A meticulously documented history of deceit. Listening to him, a cold dread mingled with a profound sense of vindication. Archer wasn't just an opportunist, he was a master manipulator, a career criminal who had perfected his craft. The escape fund and the Lake Oswego property weren't isolated incidents. They were merely the latest iterations of a deep-seated predatory strategy. O'Connell's confession was the missing piece, the final, undeniable proof that Archer's actions were not a momentary lapse of judgment, but a long-standing, ingrained criminal enterprise. It solidified our case, not just as a divorce battle with elements of fraud, but as a systematic dismantling of a lifelong con artist. The full, monstrous scope of Archer's betrayal now stood fully revealed, a shadow stretching far beyond our marriage. The game was indeed about to enter its final decisive phase. The decisive phase of the game arrived swiftly, heralded not by trumpets, but by the sterile hum of a conference room's air conditioning. The mediation room was bland, impersonal, designed to neutralize emotion, yet the tension that filled it was thick enough to taste. Evelyn sat beside me, a fortress of calm competence. Across the polished mahogany table, Archer perched, impeccably dressed as always, flanked by his own lawyer, a man whose perpetually weary expression seemed to deepen with each passing moment. Archer, despite the evidence I knew Evelyn possessed, still carried an air of defiant arrogance, a smug confidence that grated on my nerves. He believed, I was sure, that he could talk his way out of anything, charm or bluster his way past inconvenient truths. A quick glance in my direction was met with a dismissive smirk, as if to say, "You can't possibly win." The mediator, a woman with kind but firm eyes, opened the proceedings with a boilerplate introduction. But my focus was entirely on Evelyn. She began not with accusations but with facts. Her voice clear and measured, each word a carefully placed stone in a crumbling wall. She presented the initial financial statements, highlighting the subtle but systematic diversions of funds from Daily Grind's accounts, money that had vanished into thin air, or so Archer had intended. He shifted uneasily, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, but still held his head high, ready with a practiced denial. "These transfers," Evelyn stated, her finger tracing a line on a magnified document projected onto a screen, were funneled into an entity known as NW Holdings LLC, a shell corporation designed solely to obscure the true recipient of these considerable assets. She brought up the corporate registry documents, the generic P.O. box, the proxy agent. Archer's smirk wavered, replaced by a slight frown. His lawyer, for the first time, leaned forward, a question in his eyes. Next came the Lake Oswego property. The opulent lodge, its glossy photos now projected large, a testament to Archer's secret luxury, hit the room like a physical shockwave. Evelyn meticulously linked the property's purchase to NW Holdings LLC, illustrating with undeniable precision how Archer had used our shared wealth, the very security I had managed for our family, to build his clandestine escape. The air in the room grew heavy. Archer's face began to pale, the color draining from his cheeks as if in slow motion. He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but no sound emerged. His lawyer's hand subtly rose, a silent warning for him to remain still. But the true apex, the final, crushing blow, was yet to come. Evelyn paused, letting the silence of the room, the weight of the evidence, settle. Then, her voice dropped slightly, gaining an almost chilling gravitas. "And finally," she said, her eyes fixed on Archer, "we have the sworn testimony of Mr. Kevin O'Connell. Mr. O'Connell, Archer's former business partner from a venture years ago, has come forward to reveal a pattern of behavior identical to what we've just presented, a meticulously documented history of systematic financial fraud, embezzlement, and manipulation, confirming that the actions we're discussing today are not an isolated incident, but a long-standing, ingrained criminal enterprise." The words hung in the air, a bell tolling for Archer's deception. His bravado crumbled, his face contorting into a mask of abject horror and defeat. His lawyer, usually unflappable, looked utterly beaten, his shoulders slumping, his gaze fixed on the table as if willing it to swallow him whole. There was no argument, no bluster, no desperate attempt at a lie. Just stunned, suffocating silence. The mediator jotted notes, her expression now one of grave understanding. Archer's house of cards, built on years of charming lies and secret pilfering, had finally, undeniably, collapsed under the sheer, unassailable weight of his own calculated deceit. He was no longer the confident entrepreneur, the wronged husband. He was simply a man caught, exposed, and utterly ruined. And in that moment, observing his utter downfall, a quiet, profound triumph settled in my chest, a cold, clear vindication that was more satisfying than any public spectacle could ever be. That cold, clear vindication deepened as Archer's lawyer, having absorbed the full impact of Evelyn's presentation, finally urged him to capitulate. There was no fighting it. No room for his usual bluster. The legal machine, armed with my meticulous evidence and Kevin O'Connell's damning testimony, had cornered him. The next few hours were a blur of concessions, his lawyer desperately trying to salvage some semblance of dignity, while Evelyn, sharp and relentless, ensured every advantage was ours. The agreement, finalized days later, was unequivocally in my favor. I gained significant shares in Daily Grind, not just as a silent partner, but as a named, rightful owner, with a controlling interest that would ensure its stability and future. Free from Archer's grasp, the opulent Lake Oswego Lodge, that symbol of his secret betrayal and lavish plans, was ordered to be sold. Its substantial proceeds contributing directly to my settlement, along with a significant portion of our remaining joint assets, and there would be substantial alimony. A bitter irony given his plans for an escape fund, now ensuring my financial independence and security for years to come. His public humiliation, already set in motion at the Riverfront Hotel, now cascaded into a full-blown societal reckoning. The news of the divorce, laden with the details of his systematic fraud and embezzlement, spread through Portland like wildfire. Daily Grind, once his empire, began to crumble. Customers, employees, and suppliers alike looked at him differently, their admiration replaced by disgust. The cafe, once a bustling hub, transformed into a monument of his dishonesty, its revenue plummeting as word of his systemic fraud, his betrayal of a beloved local institution, spread like wildfire. The charming visionary was now simply a pariah. Campbell Fletcher, predictably, vanished from his side. I heard through Sarah, who had tentatively started to bridge the gap between us, that Campbell had packed her bags within days of the settlement being announced, citing Archer's financial incompetence and total lack of prospects. The love he had been willing to sacrifice everything for dissolved into thin air, a testament to its shallow roots and mercenary nature. She, too, found herself caught in the backwash of his scandal, her meticulously curated social media presence suddenly devoid of any mention of Archer, her bright laugh no longer carrying over the hum of espresso machines. Archer lost it all. His wealth, painstakingly built on lies and manipulation, was stripped away, leaving him with little more than the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal fees. His carefully curated reputation, the charming facade he'd maintained for years among Portland's elite, lay in tatters, beyond repair. His mistress, the glittering prize he'd pursued with such ruthless ambition, abandoned him without a second glance, leaving him utterly alone, and perhaps most satisfyingly, in his gaunt face and haunted eyes whenever I saw him from afar, a rare and fleeting glimpse, I recognized the complete erosion of his self-respect. He was a shell, reduced to nothing but the stark, bitter consequences of his own choices, a man utterly undone by his own deceit. My victory was complete. The taste of victory, while undeniably sweet, lingered like a complex aftertaste, mingled with the quiet ache of what had been broken beyond Archer alone. My first priority, the most precious piece of my fractured world, was Landry. She returned from my parents' house a few days after the settlement was signed, her usual cheerful demeanor subdued, a thoughtful frown etched between her brows. We sat together on her bed, surrounded by her beloved stuffed animals, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. "Mom," she began, her voice small, her eyes fixed on her clasped hands. "Grandma and Grandpa, they told me everything. About Dad, about the money, and about the hotel." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I was so angry at you at first, for embarrassing him, for making everything public. Sarah's mom said you were being mean." A fresh wave of maternal guilt washed over me, but I braced myself, knowing this conversation was vital. "I know it looked that way, sweetheart," I said, reaching out to gently brush her hair from her face, "and I'm so sorry you had to hear about it that way, or that you felt like you had to defend me." She looked up, her eyes glistening. "But then Grandpa showed me some of the papers, the ones you found, and Grandma explained how much Dad took, and how he was going to leave us with nothing." A tear tracked a path down her cheek. "I thought you were just mad he had a girlfriend." But he was going to take our house, wasn't he? Our business? Her voice cracked with the weight of this new understanding. He was hurting us, I nodded, my own throat tightening. Yes, honey. He was. And I had to stop him. I had to protect us. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered, leaning into me, her small arms wrapping tightly around my waist. I didn't understand. I thought you were just being mean, but you were being brave. Her words, simple and pure, were a balm to my wounded soul, melting away the sharp edges of the external world's judgment. To have her understand, to have her see beyond the scandal to the true heart of my actions, was a profound gift. A rebuilding of the most sacred bridge in my life. Our bond, once stretched thin by Archer's neglect and my own silent suffering, was now forged anew, stronger and more honest than ever. The tide, once turned against me, slowly began to shift. Sarah was the first to approach. A week after the settlement, her usual effervescent self, tempered by a genuine contrition, she found me at daily grind, now buzzing with a new energy. A palpable sense of relief from the employees. Dallas, she said, her voice soft. I am so incredibly sorry. I was an idiot. A complete and utter idiot. Her eyes, usually sparkling with gossip, were earnest. When I saw you at the gala, I just saw the chaos. The spectacle. Everyone was talking, judging. I heard the gossip, and I let it get to me. I thought you were vindictive, cruel, but then the news about Archer, the fraud, it all made sense. You weren't being mean, you were being smart, you were protecting your family. She reached across the counter, squeezing my hand. Please forgive me, I squeezed back, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. There's nothing to forgive, Sarah. It was a messy situation. And people react to what they see. Her apology, and the sincerity behind it, was a quiet testament to the truth finally prevailing. Other friends followed suit, some sheepishly, others with tearful declarations of regret. The initial wave of condemnation that had swept through my social circle began to recede, replaced by a trickle of support, then a steady stream of understanding. They had seen Archer's public image, but now they saw his true self, and mine. The isolation I had felt at Riverfront began to dissolve, replaced by a renewed sense of connection, albeit with a more discerning circle. With the external battles fought and won, and my most important relationships mended, a profound quiet settled within me. The searing rage that had fueled my investigation, the cold resolve that had carried me through the public confrontation and the legal war, began to recede. What remained was not a hollow space, but a burgeoning sense of strength and self-worth I hadn't known was possible. For 17 years I had defined myself as Archer's wife, a supportive shadow, a silent partner. Now, I was simply Dallas Hayden, a woman who had faced an unimaginable betrayal, and emerged not just intact, but utterly transformed. The emotional process of healing was not linear. There were days when the sting of his deceit resurfaced, a sharp echo of a painful memory, but increasingly, those moments were overshadowed by a profound sense of peace. I moved beyond the anger, not by forgetting, but by understanding that his actions were a reflection of his character, not my worth. His betrayal had been his burden, not mine to carry. I had reclaimed my narrative, my dignity, and my future. Embracing my newfound freedom was exhilarating. The heavy cloak of obligation and emotional neglect had been lifted, revealing a world of possibilities I had long suppressed. The fear of being alone, once a quiet undertone to my marriage, had vanished, replaced by the exhilarating power of resilience. I had navigated the depths of betrayal, fought for my family, and won. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a rebirth, a rediscovery of a stronger, wiser, and more confident woman, who was ready to face whatever came next, entirely on her own terms. The vast expanse of my regained freedom wasn't an empty void, but an exhilarating space ready for construction. For too long, my innate capability had been muted, channeled only to support Archer's ambition. Now, with a significant stake and a controlling interest in daily grind, the path forward was clear. I would reclaim the business I had silently helped build, not just as an owner, but as its new visionary. My first act was to systematically audit every aspect. Not just for financial discrepancies, but for opportunities for genuine innovation. I brought in new management, people who shared my values of transparency and community, and began to transform Daily Grind from Archer's self-serving empire into a place that truly reflected the warmth and connection it had always promised. We introduced new blends, collaborated with local artists, and launched initiatives to support women-owned businesses in Portland. The hum of the espresso machine, once a backdrop to Archer's deceit, now sang a different tune, one of honest work and renewed purpose. My financial stability was absolute, a sturdy foundation built on the ashes of Archer's fraud. The Lake Oswego property had sold quickly, its proceeds a tangible testament to my victory, reinforcing the accounts that Archer had tried to drain. With Evelyn Reed's guidance, every asset was meticulously managed, ensuring not just comfort, but a profound, unshakable independence. I no longer feared the unexpected, no longer worried about a future dictated by another's whims. The fear that had once shadowed my decisions, the subtle anxiety of relying on someone who consistently undervalued me, had dissolved. I was my own anchor now, financially secure and self-sufficient. More profound than any monetary gain, however, was the seismic shift within me. The woman who had picked up Archer's tablet that fateful Tuesday afternoon, the one who had silently tolerated dismissiveness for years, was gone. In her place stood someone forged in the crucible of betrayal and triumph. I was stronger, not with the brittle strength of anger, but with the resilient power of self-knowledge. I was wiser, acutely attuned to the subtle signs of manipulation and deceit, yet equally open to genuine connection, and I was confident, not with Archer's swaggering arrogance, but with a quiet, unwavering belief in my own judgment and capabilities. My voice, once a quiet murmur in the background of my own life, now resonated with clarity and authority. My life, once a carefully constructed illusion, now blossomed with authentic connections. Landry and I navigated our new normal with open hearts, our bond deepened by shared understanding. Her simple, heartfelt apology had been a healing balm, cementing a trust that felt unbreakable. We cooked together, laughed freely, and talked about everything, rebuilding our world with honesty as its cornerstone. Sarah, now a staunch ally, became a regular fixture, her previous distance replaced by unwavering support and genuine friendship. We gathered new friends too, people drawn to authenticity, not pretense. There were no more polite smiles hiding judgment, no more forced social obligations, just real, messy, beautiful human connections, built on trust and mutual respect. This journey, from silent partner to self-possessed phoenix, had been arduous, painful, and at times, terrifying. But in overcoming the deepest betrayal, I had found not just freedom, but a profound purpose. My story wasn't just about reclaiming what was lost. It was about discovering what was always within me, dormant and waiting. It was a testament to the quiet strength that resides in every woman who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or betrayed. To anyone standing at the precipice of their own unraveling, I offer this truth. The end of one chapter is merely the challenging, yet exhilarating, beginning of another. Find your voice, trust your instincts. And when they try to dim your light, remember that even in the deepest shadows, a phoenix can rise, stronger and more brilliant than before, ready to soar on wings of its own making.